Ladies and gentlemen, got ourselves a fight card this weekend, which means we got some fights to break down. Taking a look at it, though, we got UFC Fight Night Strickland versus Hernandez coming up this Saturday. Is February 21st, 7 o'clock Central Time, so adjust accordingly. Looks like it's going to be in the Toyota Center in Houston, H-Town. Maybe Derek Lewis will be in the building. The card itself, it's okay. It's not, like, terrible. I wouldn't say it's complete dog shit, but I also wouldn't be, like, beating down any doors to see it, per se. But we'll break down the main event like we normally do, and then we'll take a look at the prelims as well. But, of course, the main thrust of our time will be spent on the main card like usual. There is 6 fights on this main card, which is kind of surprising. Doesn't typically shake out like that. Let's skip past the main one. We'll just go ahead and start in the prelims here. Juliana Miller versus Carly Judice. Judice? I don't really got a lot of opinions on these prelims. I think most of them, by and large, are probably going to be meh. This fight, pretty lopsided on the odds, so you would think, Carly's going to go out there and just beat the fucking brakes off of Juliana. Minus 950. Jesus. Let's see what kind of outcome she's got here. 5-2, all by knockout. That's why. That would be why. 2 wins in a row, 2 losses in a row, and then 3 in a row before that. So it's not, I don't know, not like she has a stellar record or anything. She just has finishes, and Juliana Miller likes to eat some punches, has some pretty dog shit striking, so maybe I got to assume that's what everybody's basing this off of. So yeah, probably a one-sided ass whooping, if I had to guess there. If the odds are an indicator at all, which, of course, that does add a little bit of pressure. You then have a little more to live up to, but I think this one's going to be pretty accurate. We got a featherweight bout next. Jordan Levitt versus Yadier Del Valle. I don't know how you say it. Jordan Levitt, fun fighter, the Monkey King. Decent grappler. Not the greatest striking, but he does have a knockout like not too terribly long ago on his record, which was kind of a surprising one. Definitely favors the jiu-jitsu, though. Has kind of a funky grappling style, but pretty slick with it on the ground. Doesn't seem to be the most physically gifted guy on planet Earth. Like, he's not just, like, terribly strong and ragdolling these guys or anything like that. I think he gets by on being pretty slick, doing some tricky stuff, some funky unconventional stuff. But he's going against a guy here in Yadier Del Valle who is built like a brick shithouse. So I think he's going to be at a pretty significant strength deficit here, disadvantage, if you will. Jordan Levitt's going down to 155 as well for the first time. I think he was a welterweight prior to that, so kind of makes you wonder how he's going to do with the weight cut. Is his chin going to be compromised? And consequently, is Yadier going to capitalize on that, or is he going to, I don't want to necessarily say bait, but is he going to engage in the grappling game just to get it to a spot where maybe he can submit Jordan, because Jordan has been submitted before. And Yadier has obviously never been beaten, so we'll see. Recently, Yadier was kind of in some found himself in a weird position with this Isaac Dulgarian fight. This was one where the odds had like crazy movement ahead of time, and people were kind of jumping on it, and there was rumors, leaks that there was going to be a fixed fight, and this and that, and one dude throwing the fight, blah, blah, blah. Isaac Dulgarian, I never really heard the final resolution on that, but they cut him, if I remember correctly, so I guess where there's smoke, there's fire. There had to be a little bit of something to that, some kind of substance to the accusations. But Yadier is coming out the other side of that. You'd think he'd want to go out there and have like a pretty dominant performance to kind of, wash the taste out of people's mouth, I guess, after the Isaac Dulgarian one. So we'll see. My guess is Yadier is going to go out there and put a statement, put a stamp on old Jordan Levitt. We'll see. Should be a good fight, though. Very fun one. Next, we have a welterweight bout. We have old Phil Rowe going against Jean-Paul Lebaznoyani. That's how you say it, right? Phil Rowe, UFC vet at this point, kind of reminds me of Neil Magny. I was saying this last night on Big Gun Brian Petrie's stream with Hey Jive, that he reminds me of Neil Magny, and I kind of think we might have the potential for that here. He's not quite as good as Neil Magny, Philip Rowe. Doesn't have like the wet blanket effect that Neil Magny has on dudes. But I think has a little bit better boxing than Neil Magny does. Not crazy power. He's kind of a volume guy. He's 11-6, 7 KOs, 4 subs. Lost 1 time by KO and 5 times by decision. 3-1 in his last 4, 1-3 in his last 4. I said that backwards. So not exactly the greatest record of late. Going against a guy, though, in Jean-Paul Lebaznoyani, Mufasa. He's from Hermosa Beach, California, or at least fighting out of it. 27 years young, 5'11", 9-2. He's got 3 knockout wins, 5 subs, 1 decision, lost twice by KO. Coming off 4 in a row, which is pretty juicy. 2 finishes in a row, KO and a sub. So the guy clearly likes to mix it up a little bit, favors the submissions a little. So you got to wonder, it's close enough on those finishes. Is this just by circumstance, just the way the fight's actually played out, or does he actually favor grappling and intend to work his way towards that in fights? Against Phil Rowe, decent grappler. I don't know. We'll see. This is going to be a good litmus test for old Jean-Paul. Does he belong in the UFC or not? What are the odds on this? 2-1 favorite, Labaz-Noyani. I was going to say go with him, so a 2-1 favorite. I guess you kind of have to, but I don't know. Not a ton of money to be made there unless you're going to be betting heavy on it. And I don't know enough about this guy to be betting that confident on this one, so maybe sit it out, just enjoy it, watch a fun scrap. Next, we got another welterweight scrap. Ramiz Brahimaj versus Puna Soriano. Punahele. Fun scrap. Ramiz, I think, is coming off a win over Austin Vanderford. He might have one after that. I'm blanking out on it. No, that was his last one. It was in October. Got a submission win over Austin Vanderford. Cracked him and hurt him and then choked his ass out. Vanderford doesn't have the greatest chin, though, so I don't know. You really can't say a ton about that. 13-5, 1 KO, 12 submissions. Good grief. Guy's snatching up everybody's neck. Going against a dude here in Puna, 33 years old, 7-2-3, 1 knockout loss, 1 sub loss, 2 decisions. Pretty decent grappler. He's kind of been leaning on that a little bit in his last couple fights, going out there and wrestling dudes and such. So you think he's going to be somewhat comfortable in the grappling, but then also knowing how much of a threat in that department that Brahimaj is, you would think he would maybe try to avoid that, maybe expose him on the feet. I would say Puna probably has a little bit of a power advantage. Not really seen a ton out of the striking of Ramiz. This is a tough fight for me. I think Puna has the chance to maybe get an upset here. What are the odds? Oh, it's okay, so basically a toss-up fight. So I guess the odds makers and public money feel relatively the same way. You can maybe play Ramiz by sub. Yeah, they don't have the odds out on that one yet. We'll have to see what those odds are. They'll probably be out tomorrow, if I had to guess. Those props usually come out a little bit later in the week, but yeah, I could see Ramiz maybe snatching up a neck or Puna winning like a decision or something. That's kind of how I see that one shaking out. Next up, women's bantamweight bout. We got Nora Cornol versus Jocelyn Edwards. Nora, I think I've only seen like 1 or 2 of her fights. We've seen quite a few of Jocelyn Edwards at this point. You know, I don't even really give a shit. We're not going to waste time on those. Flyweight bout, we got Alden Correa versus Louis Garul. Don't know a ton about these guys. Not going to have a very strong opinion there. Let's take a look at their records just to see what we got, though. 11-3, 10-2. 27 years old, 5 KOs, 4 subs, 2 decisions. Lost once by sub, twice by decision. No contest. Well, he's pretty active. 3 fights last year. Not too bad. Going against Louis Garul, Grim Garul. 32 years old, 10-2, 5 knockouts, 1 sub, 4 decisions, 2 losses in a row, a decision and a TKO to Ode Osborne, who I believe is also on this card. Okay, fun scrap. Not going to bet on that one. Obviously, we don't know a ton about that. Oh, there you go. There's Ode Osborne right there. Next fight, we'll just move on to that one then. Flyweight bout, we got Ode Osborne versus Alibi Adiris. He's a Kazakh guy. My jiu-jitsu coach is a Kazakh, so I'm already going to be rooting for that dude. 13-9 against 11-1. Ode, I would, as a UFC vet, I'd be willing to wager that he's probably been fighting a higher level of competition. The Jamaican sensation is 34 years old, 13-9, 6 KOs, 4 subs, 3 decisions. He's lost twice by KO, 4 times by sub, and 3 times by decision. Coming off a decision loss to old Steve Erceg. I need to go back and rewatch that one. For some reason, I feel like I remember him tagging old Erceg. Now, is this a rematch? Louis Garul. That's who he's fighting, right? Or am I mixing this up? No. That was the previous fight. Alden's fighting Louis. Very interesting. Okay, kind of wild. 2 dudes who have fought each other right there next to each other on the card. Back to back. What about Adiris? Alibi Adiris. I ought to ask my coach how you pronounce that last name. He's from Aktau, Kazakhstan. 31 years old, 10-1. 4 KOs, 2 subs, 4 decisions. He's lost 1 time by sub. Known as his most recent fight. Interesting. Interesting. He's been fighting in NISA Fighter Championship. Never even heard of that league, so I feel pretty confident in saying that Ode has fought a higher level of competition at this point. So, kind of, again, a litmus test. Let's see how he fares against a guy who, like, how do you say this politely? He's not the greatest in the division. He's kind of a gatekeeper. I don't want to, like, that has such a negative connotation. You almost don't want to say it about some of these dudes because Ode seems like an all right guy, but fuck it, you got to say it. And I don't mean it in a bad way. It's just like a good litmus test, as I said earlier, for the sport. Or not even for the sport, for like this league, if you will. It's like, does this guy belong at this high of a competition level? Does he belong in the UFC against debatably the best in the world? Some people would disagree, but either way, last fight on the prelims, welterweight scrap, another one. We've got a lot of welterweight bouts in this one, it seems like. Three so far just in the prelims. We got Chidi Njokuani versus Carlos Leal. Both dudes, I want to say... Actually, Chidi might be coming off a loss, and then Carlos Leal might be coming off a KO win over Muslim Salikov? Where's Chidi? Loss. Oh, yeah, the RNC to Jake Matthews. But before that, TKO over Zaleski dos Santos, who I actually, if I remember, I lost money on that one because I think I picked Zaleski dos Santos. Big striker, though, 37 years old, so he's kind of on the back nine of his career, you would think. 25-11, 15 KOs, 1 sub, 9 decisions. Lost 5 times by KO, 4 times by sub, and 2 decisions. Going against guy Carlos Leal, bit of an age advantage here at 31 years old. He's 22-7, 11 KOs, 2 subs, 7 decisions, and 2 others, which is kind of wild. 1 KO loss, 1 sub loss, 5 decisions. Oh, he's coming. I thought, for some reason, I had in my head that he beat Muslim Salikov. You know, the stupid thing is I actually think I might have picked Muslim Salikov in that. But I've got my notes right here, so let's check. Muslim Salikov. No, that was Uros Medic. And we picked, I think I probably have to go with Uros, but again, I played the under more than likely. So we picked Uros and the under there. Geoff Neal. Muslim Salikov. Well, I guess, yeah, I don't know that I have that one now. Maybe we didn't pick anyone in that one, but you can't knock Carlos too much for losing to Muslim Salikov. While he's a little bit older and his chin's not great, his striking is pretty damn high level, and I think he's one of these guys that he has a potential to catch pretty much anybody if you don't manage to catch him first or shut his lights off or weather the storm. So Leal was just on the other end of that. I think he's also one of these guys who maybe the stricter testing might have gotten a hold of him. He used to come in looking absolutely fucking jacked. It didn't look quite this good in his last fight. So maybe the drug testing is getting a hold of him. I'd like to see the odds on this one because I actually lean towards old Chidi. Bang, bang. Oh, we're taking Chidi, yeah. So I was looking at the fights earlier and forgot we were eyeing that line. But at plus 105, I'll take Chidi. You can maybe take him by KO as well. Leal's got not the greatest chin. I mean, it's okay. It's not terrible, but obviously he can be put away. Muslim Salikov, put him away. Chidi's not as slick of a striker as Muslim Salikov, but I think he has more power, so it's kind of a trade-off there. And I think he gets it done. Leal's going to go in there and maybe try to trade with him, and I think that's going to be a bad idea. And then also Chidi has the reach advantage. I think he'll be able to reach out and touch him. So we'll see. Chidi's going to, I would imagine, want to come back and make a little bit of a statement here, kind of show that he's still viable, that he's still relevant in the division, that it's not ready to be put out to pasture quite yet. So we'll see how he does. I'm rooting for Chidi, though. And then we're moving on to the main card here. Like I said, we got 6 fights, quite a few. It's okay. It's not like stellar. I do think this is one of those, though, that has the potential to surprise people and be an awesome card. So we'll see how that shakes out. First fight of the night, though, first fight of the main card, I should say. Middleweight bout, we got Zach Reese going against Michel Pereira. Fun scrap here. Zach Reese coming off, I want to say, an RNC win. Let me check my notes here. Over our boy Jackson McVeigh. Let me double check that. Yeah, against a guy, Jackson McVeigh, who trains at St. Charles MMA, so we root for that dude. But Zach Reese, 31 years old, he's 10-2, 5 wins by KO, 3 by sub, 2 by decision. He's lost twice by KO. Fairly well-rounded guy. Things we noticed when I was actually watching his video here and taking notes. Fairly tall, switches stance, kind of has an upright stance, though. It's like a shorter, not like the long L stance of Taekwondo, but kind of a shorter, almost side karate stance, like a not quite as long as Wonder Boy. Locked up a decent arm attack from his back against Cody Brundage oh, I was like, man, did I not see the Cody Brundage fight? But there it is. Locked that up pretty well, but then proceeded to get spiked on his melon, if I remember correctly. So not a great look there. Does leave his neck out there a bit as well. I think Dusko Todorovic, how you say his last name, was attacking that a couple different times. And while he wasn't able to lock it up, he was throwing it out there. And guys who are either going to be real strong, that can lock it up and just rip his fucking head off, or guys who are actually good at jiu-jitsu might be able to take advantage of that and choke him. Attack's pretty short, given his length, though. Doesn't fight very long, which is kind of surprising. Likes the dirty clinch fighting, was throwing a lot of elbows and knees. And then the other thing I noticed there is he was willing to accept the positions on the ground quite a bit. He was willing to go to his back, which, if you're real slick on the ground, isn't the worst thing of all time. But in a sport like MMA, you kind of want to see like positional dominance and a willingness to wrestle back to his feet, as opposed to kind of just settling into the position and then getting fucking rocked or slammed on his head or something. Going against a guy, though, old Michel Pereira, 32 years old, 31-14, shitload of experience. Won 11 times by KO, 9 by sub, 11 decisions. He's lost 3 times by KO, once by sub, and 9 by decisions. Coming off 3 losses in a row. TKO to Anthony Hernandez, decision to Abus Magomedov, and then another KO to Kyle Dawkins, which I think I was wrong on. I think I had Michel in this one. What to say about this dude that's not been said before? He's obviously physically gifted. He's explosive. He's fast. He's powerful. Gasses horribly. Terrible fight IQ. Does a lot of really silly shit sometimes. There was a point in time where he was doing like backflips in the cage and just jumping off the side of the cage to fucking try and Superman punch guys and doing backflips into the guard and all this stuff. And I think it's cost him a couple fights, and he's starting to get the idea a little bit, but I still think he does some silly shit occasionally. Stylistically, kind of an upright, explosive kickboxer, but he's not like, there's a lot of flashy stuff and not necessarily setting up like good combos and shit like that. Powerful shots, but he's winging and kind of flailing, throwing wide where somebody could catch him, coming inside or throwing with a straight. Good kicks to the body, switches him and goes upstairs occasionally. Does throw the wheel kicks. Again, that kind of goes to my whole flashy thing. He's very upright, so anybody with like a good shot could probably take him down. Circles with his hands down after like 3 minutes with Abus. He was already exhausted and dropping his arms and shit. So I do think if Zach can stay in there and weather the storm, he might be able to win this. But it's a question of, can he weather the storm? I don't know. He gets caught a lot, and it doesn't seem to have the greatest chin. The terrible cardio of Pereira, though. I don't know, man. This is a really tough one. He could maybe take the under here and just play it safe. I could see either of these guys getting the finish. Under 2.5 minus 300, so maybe we parlay that with something else, another under, maybe under in the heavyweights or something like that. But I guess forced to pick, I'd maybe go with Michel Pereira, even though it's burned me a couple times. I do think he's the more physically gifted guy. Just kind of a matter of does it pan out for him? Does he fight with any kind of sense, or does he go out there and do all kinds of crazy, flashy shit, gas himself out, and get clapped like he always does? I don't know. We'll see. We got yet another middleweight, another welterweight bout. Jacoby Smith versus Josiah Harrell. This one, this is a weird built dude. What a weird picture. This doesn't even look real. It looks like a fucking dwarf from Lord of the Rings, like the build of him. Anyway, Jacoby Smith. Jacoby Smith even looks weird in this picture. Is it just me? Is it just this fight? Those guys look somewhat proportional. Zach Reese looks kind of a little weird. Maybe I'm just tripping. Anyway, fun scrap. This is one that I was struggling to pick on. And again, this whole fight, or this whole card, has a lot of that kind of stuff where it's going to be just on paper, good matchups, competitive fights. Hard to really place any bets with any kind of confidence here, at least for me. There's a couple that I lean towards, but by and large, pretty competitive card. So we got two guys, undefeated records here. Both of them 11-0. was like both undefeated, the exact same amount of experience. It's pretty wild. I'd like to know like their amateur backgrounds and stuff, but Jacoby Smith, 30 years old, 11-0, like I said. Got 8 wins by KO, 1 by sub, 2 by decision. It's coming off an RNC win over Nico Price. And I mean, look at all his finishes. KO over Preston Parsons, TKO over Christian Savoy, KO over Jared McLaughlin, KO over Brian Grinnell. Obviously, dude's got killer instinct, good finishing ability. He's very explosive. He's orthodox. Very fast, very physically gifted. Kind of throws a little sloppy, like he was throwing so hard on Nico, he was throwing himself off balance and shit occasionally. Like leaping into the shots, which adds to the power, but then, of course, you also end up gassing out a little bit as well because of that, which he did. He did seem to start fading a little bit in his last fight, in my opinion. Did grab the cage quite a bit as well against Nico while trying to go for the finishing sequence. He was on the ground working some like sloppy ground and pound shit, but Nico's so wiry and hard to kind of control on the ground and squirming around and stuff. Like, you get that the natural instinct would be to grab the cage, but also in the sport you can't. I don't know, man. He's not setting up a lot of stuff super clean. I'd like to see him maybe tighten that up a little bit, start throwing some combos, jab, then throw the big shot or something like that, or fake the double leg and then go upstairs, or I don't know, man. I haven't watched enough of his fights to really say that he's like technically deficient or anything like that. But it didn't exactly blow me away in his last fight for sure against Nico Price. The physical tools and stuff that he has, you would think he would have just absolutely murdered Nico, given that he got murdered in his last fight too against Varetnikov or whatever. Going against Guy though, and Josiah Harrell, if I'm not mistaken, this dude like survived cancer or something crazy. I thought I saw that somebody talking about that this week. The Muscle Hamster, he's 27. He's 11-0 as well, 6 knockouts, 4 subs, 1 decision. 5'7", so definitely at a bit of a height disadvantage here, but it's not like super crazy or anything like that. Coming off a TKO win over Dazmatov, TKO corner stoppage because he was basically just laying on the ground getting fucking hammered on. And then a decision win, sub, TKO, sub, TKO, sub. Obviously, the dude, again, another guy with killer instinct, goes out there and gets after it, ripping arms and fucking knocking people out. What do we notice here technically here? He's southpaw, shorter, stocky build, reminds me of a little bit of like a Matt Serra or something. Hands down, likes to dip below punches and counter. I say he was southpaw. He was actually switching stances. I think he might actually be an orthodox. I don't remember. Likes to dip below the punches and counter. Given his height, that kind of makes sense that stylistically he would favor something like that. It's being shorter, you can kind of duck beneath those shots a little bit easier than, a tall guy. He's got more distance he's got to cover. Did get taken down a couple times by Dazmatov, but the dude clearly struggled to control him. Those shorter, explosive guys like that are, one, very hard to sub, but if they know what they're doing on the ground, they're pretty hard to control as well because they can kind of get their limbs and their arms back to their core, which is like your strongest position in grappling. Anytime you get arms extended or legs extended from your core, they become weaker. Just leverage and body mechanics and stuff. So, very hard to control on the ground. I don't know that Jacoby Smith is going to be able to like hurt him and get an RNC or something like that, like he did against Nico, who's a little bit bigger, longer of a guy, so you can kind of get the torque on him and shit. I feel like this is one of those where Jacoby Smith is probably the more physically gifted guy, maybe the faster and more explosive dude, and Josiah Harrell is maybe the more technical guy. So who do you go with in that instance? I don't know. What are the odds? Good God, minus 300 for Jacoby Smith. This has to be a late notice switch or something like that. That's fucking nuts. For those odds, will take Josiah Harrell. I could see Jacoby Smith going out there, landing clean, putting him away. You could always hedge this out, or maybe even, maybe hedge it Jacoby by KO, or maybe the under or something like that. But I actually think this might go to decision. If Jacoby wins, that's how I see him winning. If he loses, I see momentum. He maybe wins the first round, and then momentum swings big back into Harrell's favor. The way he was able to stay in there against Dazmatov and kind of the way that fight played out, I could see something sort of similar here. A little bit of hot water in the beginning, staying composed, staying smart, covering up against the big shots, and staying safe on the ground, and then fighting his way back into the fight. So we'll see. Next up, heavyweight bout. I think it's the only heavyweight bout on the card. Yeah. We have Serghei Spivac, if I could talk right, going against Ante Delija. Kind of a weird matchup. Serghei Spivac's younger, but he's been in the UFC longer. He's 31 years old, 17-6, 7 wins by KO, 8 by sub, 2 by decision. He's lost 4 times by KO and twice by decision. Most recently coming off the decision loss to Waldo Cortez Acosta, and then the TKO loss to Gelton Almeida before that. Stylistically, he's a pretty big guy. Decent-sized heavyweight. Kind of in the middle on the weight side of things. He's not like a super pudgy big heavyweight. He's not like one of these just absolutely jacked out of his fucking mind heavyweights either. You'd maybe like to see him come in maybe a little bit better shape, actually. Drop a tad, but I don't know. Sometimes you wonder if heavyweight, they come in a little bit heavier too, just to implement kind of the size advantage that they may have. Gelton Almeida coming in at 230 is kind of the lower end of the heavyweight spectrum, and then you get a big old dude who's coming in at 265. Obviously, he can wet blanket, tire Gelton out, do that kind of shit. So maybe I should shut up and just let Serghei do whatever he wants as far as his weight is concerned. I'd like to see him come in better shape. Orthodox, not like a super long stance, kind of an in-between. He is susceptible to the low kicks. Decent throws and trips. Kind of likes to do the classic Uchimata or whatever the fuck it is in judo. Stepping out and like hip throwing somebody basically. Not the most physically gifted guy. Doesn't have a ton of horsepower behind his punches or like a lot of athleticism and speed, but probably has a good isometric strength. Those grappler dudes tend to have that pretty well. Better on the ground clearly than standing. Has an okay jab. Fairly positionally strong on the ground. He's not like giving up tons of shit and doing fancy passes and losing position because of that. He's happy to kind of settle into a half guard and do some sloppy ass ground and pound. Maybe he's gotten by on being big. He's got to have some kind of technical thing going on there though, because he chilled with Almeida for a little bit. He didn't like completely go out there and get shut out in the grappling, which Almeida is pretty. I don't know, dude. Almeida is another guy I think gets by on physicality, but he's probably better on the ground as far as jiu-jitsu is concerned than Spivac. Spivac's going to kind of settle in there and really hold you down and land those shots, whereas Gelton's just basically going to settle in and not throw any shots or do anything. Going against this guy here, though, Ante Delija, however you say it. 35 years old, walking trouble, 26-7, 6'5", big old bastard. Both these dudes are big as shit. 13 wins by KO, 6 by sub, 7 by decision. 5 losses by KO, 1 by sub, 1 decision. Most recently coming off the KO loss to Waldo Cortez Acosta, which had a little bit of controversy to it. It was kind of a shit show, to be honest with you. It was a bit of an eye poke situation, and then they stopped the fight but didn't stop the fight, and then they reviewed it and ended up letting the fight continue, and then Waldo lands immediately after that, literally seconds after that, lands a giant overhand and knocks Delija the fuck out. So that was pretty wild. Former PFL champ, absolutely blitzed Marcin Tybura. Kind of reminds me of Sergey Pavlovich a little bit in that regard, in the way he blitzes people and just opens up and starts winging punches. Has an okay chin. It's not spectacular. The hands and chin kind of, when he starts opening up, the hands come down and the chin kind of sticks out and he's surging forward. So I do think somebody slick in the striking could slip and counter him. Jorgen De Castro, I think, was able to come over the top on him a couple times. And then, of course, he blitzed him. Super fast hand speed, though. Willing to press the fight in the action, which is good. And I think in this fight, it'll pay. Spivac, in my opinion, doesn't generally do great being the nail. Typically everybody prefers to be the hammer, but you know what I mean. He fares way better at being the hammer, and then as soon as he becomes the nail, he kind of fades pretty quick and starts to crumble. I would say Ante Delija is going to win this one, probably by KO. How many times has Spivac been knocked out? It's a couple, right? 4 fucking times. All right, yeah, we're going. Delija KO, plus 110. We'll take it. You also take the under 1.5 at minus 135. I thought that was a pretty decent one, given the propensity for Ante to just blitz motherfuckers. It's either going to pay off for him big or cost him big, so we'll see what happens. Next up, third fight from the top, we've got Dan Ige going against Melquizael Costa. Real fun scrap. This one, to me, is one of the ones I'm looking forward to most on the card. Two pretty game fighters, two dudes willing to get after it. You got Dan Ige, 34 years young. Let me pull him up here. Oops, if I can click on it. 50K Dan Ige. I think he was going to change his name to 100K. 34 years old, 19-10, 7 wins by KO, 5 by sub, 7 by decision. He's lost 10 times by decision, never been finished. Fucking impressive. Most recently coming off the decision loss to Patricio Pitbull. I think we picked Pitbull in that one too, but Pitbull is another caliber of fighter than these guys, even a older kind of back nine Pitbull. Dan Ige, though, likes to move forward, throw the big right, solid power, decent grappling, not like a super, super high-level grappler and throwing up subs and shit like that. He kind of a meat and potatoes type of dude, pretty well-rounded. You give Dan Ige like a 85 or maybe like an 83 in all of his stats or something. Gets a little crazy with the striking sometimes, throws a little hair wide, gets a little reckless, but does like to walk the jab forward, kind of do the Tyson side-to-side pendulum. He'll get that shit going. Not crazy volume, more of kind of the counter striker, I would say. Strikes me as one of these guys where it's just whatever he's hitting you with, it fucking hurts. Everything with him is pretty heavy. He's a little undersized for the division, but I don't know that that's really going to be a problem against Melquizael, because he's not exactly huge either, and he's kind of a slider build, and I don't think he's a particularly strong guy, so I think Dan Ige is going to be fine in size. That's usually something I think he gives up in this division and ends up costing him sometimes. But then we got Melky, the Dalmatian Costa, 29 years old, 25-7, got a shitload of experience for his age. 8 wins by KO, 8 by sub, 9 by decision. So obviously a very well-rounded fighter. 2 losses by KO, 2 by sub, 3 by decision. So again, pretty well-rounded fighters, both in his wins and his losses. Coming off the KO win over Morgan the Pirate Charrier. Head kick was kind of wild. Pretty good knockout too. I don't remember who I picked in that one. Fight's fairly long in his stance. He's a southpaw, so I do think he's going to have some reach advantage here. Probably going to try and stay on the outside and stay away from Dan Ige's power. Whether he's successful or not, I kind of don't think so. He's pretty hittable, somewhat planted in front of his opponents at times, but he does seem to have a decent chin. I will give him that. He's durable. Again, against Dan Ige, a guy who everything he throws seems to fucking hurt. I don't know that's going to work out too well for him. Not the greatest wrestling as well. He was getting taken down by Julian Erosa quite a bit, but was able to scramble up, especially as Erosa got exhausted as the fight went on. I could see... I kind of think Dan Ige wins this one. I don't know that he puts Melky away. I could maybe see a decision. Maybe he catches him and hurts him. But I think Dan Ige... I think he's still in there, man. I think he's still game. 34 years old. Kind of he's getting at the point where it's like, all right, what are we doing here? Are we going to make a run for the title? Are we ever going to see this thing? He's only got maybe another year or two where I even think it's a possibility. Maybe a year. 35 seems to be kind of the magic number there. So do or die for Danny Ige, which will put a little added pressure on him. I think he's a guy that does well under pressure. I think Costa is just a little too hittable. Danny Ige's got a little too much power. And he's been fighting the higher caliber guys. Melky's been kind of working his way up, whereas Danny Ige has been up there for quite a while. We're going with 50K Danny Ige. What are the odds? I don't remember. Plus 175, we'll take it. That'll be one hell of a fucking dog night. If we could put a couple of them together, we'll get a nice little parlay. All right, next up, co-main event of the evening. Another fun one. We've got number 12, welterweight in the world. Yet another welterweight fucking fight. Geoff Neal against Uros Medic. Geoff Neal, 35 years old, 16-7. Let me pull his stats up here. 35 years old, he's 16-7, 10 wins by KO, 2 by sub, 4 by decision. Lost twice by KO, twice by sub, 3 times by decision. I think it's the same thing as old Melky Costa had. Coming off the KO loss to Carlos Prates. he was getting pieced up a little bit in that fight. I do remember him landing 1 or 2 shots, though, but then he fucking ate a nasty spinning elbow from old Prates, who's a just disgusting striker anyway. So you almost can't even blame the guy. 35 years old, so again, he's kind of at the same place that Dan Igue's at, where it's a do-or-die type of stage of his career. It's like, this is it, man. Are we running for the title, or are we just going to kind of take some fun fights and sail off into the sunset with a couple bags? Solid power. Striking is southpaw. Is extremely hard to take down and keep there. Got great balance, great recovery, and good scrambles. Really good counter striking. He's not a super high volume guy. He's kind of trying to pull counter and shit like that. Longer stance, light and springy on his feet, especially while fresh. He kind of settles as he starts to fade a little bit. Great in and out movement. Solid jab, good combos, and again, good grappling. He's not like got super crazy offensive wrestling or anything, but I think he's almost like a Chuck Liddell from back in the day, minus the insane power. He wants to sprawl and brawl, get back to his feet, keep the fight standing, so he can land some good counter shots and knock your ass out. Going against the guy here in Uros Medic, 32 years old, 12-3. He's got 10 wins by KO, 2 by sub. He's been KO'd once and subbed twice. Most recently coming off the TKO win over Muslim Salikov, which obviously we looked that one up earlier, and we took Uros in. And then he had the KO win over Gilbert Urbina before that. Southpaw's got a nasty straight down the middle. He's very fast. Doesn't really telegraph a ton either, so I don't know that you see the shots coming. Pretty quick. Probably going to have a speed advantage here, I would say. Geoff Neal's relatively quick, but he just isn't like the fastest guy out there. I would say he's like mid to upper tier, whereas Uros, that stood out to me. I was like, okay, this guy's pretty quick. Aggressive style. Has kind of a wider, long stance. Calf kicks generally are a little bit of an issue with him because of that wide stance, so we'll see if Geoff Neal works on that, chops up them legs a little bit. Big feints. Almost too big, though, where I think somebody with the experience and stuff of Geoff Neal is going to see through a lot of those and probably counter on a good one. I kind of think Geoff Neal gets this one done. I think he has a little bit better of a chin. With 2 KO losses on his record, you maybe wouldn't necessarily think that, but I do. When was the other one? Oh, it was Kevin Holland. That's wild. Back in 2017, Kevin Holland put him away. That was back when Kevin was a fucking monster. Man, as I'm saying this now, I'm almost halfway second guessing this. What are the odds on Geoff Neal? Minus 220? All right, well, I'm clearly not the only one who thinks he's going to fucking do this. So we're going with Geoff Neal. I would say maybe a decision, if I had to guess. Uros has been put away by Punahele. By old Puna, who's also on this card. That's tough, man. I'm going to go with Geoff Neal probably by decision. I'm going to need to settle on that before the fight. But I do like Geoff Neal money line. You can maybe throw that with one of those unders or something like that and parlay it if you wanted. But Geoff Neal gets it done. Then last but not least, the main event of the evening, a middleweight scrap. We have Sean Strickland going against Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. Pretty fun scrap here. We got Sean Strickland, who recently lost the title to Dricus. Then he had a decision win over Paulo Costa. A split decision, which is kind of surprising. I thought it was a pretty clear win for Sean. And then a decision loss to Dricus, where he kind of got the shit beat out of him. This was back in February. He's 34 years old, 29-7, 11 KO wins, 4 subs, 14 decisions. Bit of a decision machine, old Sean Strickland. He's been KO'd twice, and he's lost 5 decisions. What to say about old Sean Strickland? He's a well-rounded fighter. Good wrestling, good scrambles. Not really throwing up a ton of submissions or anything like that, but I think he, kind of similar to Geoff Neal, likes to use his wrestling mostly to negate any kind of grappling offense from his opponent, keep the fight standing where he's more comfortable, piece you up. Now, he's more of a volume striker than Geoff Neal. Tons of jabs, tons of teeps. It's like the joke online now is he's going to jab and teep you to death while also saying at the presser that he's going to fucking kill you, we're going to bleed for you, and all this other stuff. And then goes out there and jabs and teeps somebody into oblivion. You got to wonder how hungry this guy still is. I kind of thought he was, I don't know, man. Something about the second Dricus fight just didn't sit with me. It's like he couldn't ever turn up the volume, turn up the pace, and really bring the fight to Dricus. He was kind of letting Dricus do what he wanted and fight Dricus's fight. So makes you wonder where his headspace is at, how hungry he still is, especially when he's going against a young, hungry dog, and Anthony Hernandez, who I think is still very hungry, having never tasted the belt. Come on now, load. Oops. Anthony Hernandez, Fluffy, 32 years old, 15-2, 3 KO wins, 9 subs, 3 decisions. Been KO'd once and subbed once. Coming off a fuckload of wins in a row, like 8 in a row or something. RNC win over Roman Delija, who is a good grappler in his own right, but has fucking terrible cardio. Sean Strickland does have good cardio. Okay striking, Anthony Hernandez, not like super, super world class or anything. I would say Sean Strickland clearly has the advantage in the striking. Fluffy maybe has the wrestling advantage, but it's hard to say because we don't see a ton of offensive wrestling from Sean Strickland. So really the big question here is Anthony Hernandez's offensive wrestling going to be able to negate Sean's defense and be that much of a deficit between the two that he can control Sean on the ground for 5 fucking rounds, and also have the cardio and the gas tank and everything else to sustain that. I do think he has a very good gas tank. That Roman Delija fight was pretty active, and he slowed a little bit, but not obviously nearly as much as Roman Delija did. Sean Strickland faded a little bit against Dricus. I don't know, man. It's hard to say. It's like how much does Fluffy get off early? How much of a gap does he have in the grappling that he can win the fight while also not using so much energy, gassing himself out that Sean Strickland can then fight his way back into the fight? Because I do think the offensive wrestling is more taxing than the jab teep game into oblivion. And I also do think Sean Strickland is quite a bit better than Fluffy on the feet. So, can Sean Strickland hang in there for about 2 rounds of some rough wrestling, still have enough gas in the tank to come back and fight his way into the fight against Fluffy and win the last 3 rounds? I don't know. It's a pretty big question mark there. The odds have Fluffy as a -260 favorite currently. I think he's maybe even more so on DraftKings. I'm not certain of that. I think this is really a tough fight for me, man. Fuck it. We're going for Sean Strickland. I do think he has the defensive wrestling to negate most of Hernandez's game. He looks in incredible shape. That I did notice that he looks fucking shredded to the gills. Took a lot of time off, so hopefully he's kind of recouped, got his head back together, whereas Hernandez has been pretty active, I want to say. Yeah, he's at least more active than Sean, so maybe the rest will do him some good. I think Sean cancels out the wrestling, keeps it on the feet, jabs, and teeps his way to a boring decision win. So we'll see. Maybe if you want to be safe, just take the over 4.5. You could parlay it with something. I think there was also a hedge. These odds were better earlier in the week, but Sean Strickland by decision was like a plus. Well, I was texting my buddy this the other night. Let me see here. Yeah, so just literally like 2 nights ago, Strickland by points was plus 450, and Fluffy was plus 140 by decision, and both those odds have gotten worse. So clearly other people are thinking along those same lines. Get you a hedge, and that way you've got coverage on both sides. So long as somebody doesn't get a finish, you'll come out with some money, and you'll feel good doing it. So we're going with Sean Strickland, though. I think a decision win. He's fought too good of guys. Level of competition has been too high. Had the belt. I think he negates the wrestling, pieces Anthony Hernandez up to a decision win, and then maybe he finds himself in title contention against old Hamzat. We'll see. That's it, folks. UFC Fight Night Strickland vs. Hernandez is in the bag. Let me know what you think in the comments. Any fights or bets that you have, some picks that you have. Like, comment, follow, subscribe, do all the good shit. Help a brother out, and we will see you guys next time. Peace out.